J'ouvre maintenant la.
This meeting is now called to order.
But those members know it takes me a few minutes to go over some of the rules and introductions. So thank you all for coming in today. It's wonderful to see so many witnesses here in person. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 47.
Welcome to the 47th meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Accounts. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083G, the committee is continuing its study on Report 10, specific COVID-19 benefits.
Une fois de plus, l'occasion de discuter de notre rapport sur les prestations spécifiques liées à la COVID-19, qui a été déposé à la Chambre des communes le 6.
Tabled in the House of Commons on December 6, 2022, I'd like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. Joining me today are Melanie Cabana and Lucie Després, who were responsible for the audit. This audit examines 6 COVID-19 benefit programs intended to support individuals and employers through the pandemic. We looked at whether Employment and Social Development Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency managed these programs efficiently and effectively, and whether they provided value for money outcomes. Our work also examined amounts paid to recipients and whether procedures to recover overpayments and payments made to ineligible recipients were timely. For all the programs we audited, we found that $4.6 billion was overpaid to ineligible individuals. We also estimated that payments of at least $27.4 billion should be investigated further to confirm whether recipients were eligible. This includes $11.9 billion in benefits paid to individuals. At the committee's request, we are focusing today on benefits to support individuals. We concluded that Employment and Social Development Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency quickly delivered financial support to individuals. Programs that normally would have taken months or years to design were operational within weeks and helped those most affected by the pandemic. This included women, visible minorities, youth, and Indigenous people, as well as people who lost their jobs or otherwise suffered a marked drop in income. COVID-19 programs were effective at preventing an increase in poverty, reducing income inequalities, and helping the economy bounce back.
Employment and Social Development Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency decided to limit prepayment controls. This meant that they would have to do more work later to verify whether payments were accurate and had gone to eligible individuals. This is consistent with international best practices for delivering support during an emergency. As the pandemic continued and programs were extended and modified, the department and the agency added some prepayment controls. However, for each program, some eligibility criteria still had no corresponding prepayment control. Given limited prepayment controls, Employment and Social Development Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency made the early decision to focus on post-payment verifications. However, we found that the number of planned post-payment verifications was low, and that the department and the agency did not plan to verify all the payments to recipients identified as potentially ineligible. In addition, because the department and the agency delayed post-payment verification work as the pandemic continued, they are now at risk of not completing planned post-payment verifications within legislated timeframes. Efforts to collect amounts owing had been limited at the time of our report. As of the summer of 2022, approximately $2.3 billion of COVID benefit overpayments had been repaid. As with the wage subsidy in support of employers, I am concerned about the limited progress in post-payment verification work for these programs. The federal government spent billions of dollars to help people in a time of crisis, and it does not know whether that money always went to eligible recipients. In the interest of being fair to all taxpayers, the government must carry out rigorous verification work. Regardless of the approach it takes, it must be clear and transparent with Canadians. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening remarks. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Auditor. I'll now turn to Mr. Hamilton, CRA Commissioner. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for this opportunity to discuss the Auditor General's Report 10, specific COVID-19 benefits. You've already introduced my colleagues here are with me at the table. And as I stated at my last appearance before this committee last week, I want to thank the Auditor General and her team for their essential and diligent work. Work at the agency has already begun to respond to the Auditor General's recommendations. The CRA fully agrees with 6 of the Auditor General's recommendations and partially accepts the recommendation that applies both to ESDC and CRA. And this is noted in CRA's action plan, which has been submitted to this committee. In the context of the pandemic, the CRA was tasked with administering 12 emergency programs in order to deliver critical support to Canadians who either lost their job, couldn't go to work because they were sick, or had to stay home in order to take care of a loved one or to comply with local health guidelines. The attestation-based approach put in place by the government guided the implementation of all of the COVID-19 emergency and recovery support programs administered by the CRA, ensuring that funds needed by Canadians were issued in a timely and compassionate manner. Fournir des prestations aux Canadiens était au cours de la
Delivering benefits to Canadians was key to the government's response. The CRA's approach throughout has been to ensure that people got the help they needed when they needed it. Relying on our robust systems and a strong, experienced workforce, we were well placed to administer these programs by conducting application processing and compliance activities.
Not perfect. Each week, we learned something new in this extraordinary time based on the intelligence that we were gathering. These lessons learned allowed us to refine our prepayment controls and adjust the manner in which we administered the programs. And those lessons learned were shared with this committee on March 31st, 2022. A key prepayment control was added in the summer of 2020 when tax data was used to proactively block 700,000 applicants. Our controls also prevented a potential of $5 billion in additional ineligible payments. Prepayment verification activities, also, or post-payment verification activities, excuse me, also part of our compliance strategy, are now well underway within the CRA, with hundreds of thousands of post-payment verifications planned. Comme je l'ai souligné lors de...
As I noted in my appearance last week, the approach adopted by the CRA optimizes recoveries and prioritizes the stewardship of public funds and efficient use of resources. It also reduces the impact on Canadians by limiting the number of audits of eligible applicants.
With the STC to identify compliance risks and act accordingly. As of January 19th of this year, the CRA has sent out more than 960,000 notices of redetermination to individuals, with thousands more to be sent, informing them that they have an unpaid debt on their account. These notices represent approximately $4.2 billion. In addition, as part of our compliance efforts, the CRA and ESDC will continue to pursue all of those cases where individuals were provided with an advance lump sum payment for EI-IRB, as well as cases where individuals received more than one type of benefit for the same period. And all recovery efforts are progressing. It is important to note that our compliance work can involve vulnerable populations, many of whom are struggling. The CRA's recovery approach continues to be flexible and rooted in empathy to respond to the situations these Canadians face. En terminant, je veux encore...
In closing, I want to once again recognize the dedicated work of CRA employees during this difficult time as they administered these programs, which, in the words of the Auditor General herself, prevented a rise in poverty in Canada.
Employees have done all of this while continuing to deliver upon our core tax and benefit administration programs, including the processing of individual and business returns, issuing benefits, credits, and refunds to Canadians. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci, and I'd be pleased to answer any questions.
Et merci beaucoup. Finalement,
Thank you. And finally, we'll be hearing from Deputy Minister Jean-François Tremblay.
The COVID-19 benefits. I'm joined with a list of people that you already named very well, so I won't repeat them. We want to thank the Office of the Auditor General for this work and for the report. I also want to recognize that we are gathering today on the unceded land of the territory of the Algonquin Nation, Anishinaabe Nation. Au début de la pandémie de COVID-19,
At the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we acted quickly to provide access to emergency income support to millions of Canadians, including the self-employed. With Parliament support, the CERB was implemented with an attestation-based application process rather than upfront controls. This approach allowed us to process applications and deliver the CERB as quickly as possible in April of 2020.
This application process was balanced by the back-end risk-based integration framework focused on fraud detection, prevention measures, as well as post-payment verification of claimants' eligibility. The International Public Sector Fraud Forum has acknowledged that the attestation-based process is the best practice when providing emergency support. And right from the start, we made it clear that eligibility would be verified after the fact using tax data. Dans l'ensemble, la vérificatrice générale...
Overall, the Auditor General's report found the government's COVID-19 benefit programs, including the CERB, achieved their objectives in terms of helping mitigate poverty and income inequality, as well as facilitating an economic rebound. We have a strong plan to conduct post-payment verification, and we are carrying out this work methodically.
Assessed 100% of all the CERB applications for potential ineligibility. As of January 6, 2023, ESDC has sent 55,000 fact-finding letters to potentially ineligible recipients requesting proof of eligibility. We also have issued 1.8 million overpayment notices to individuals to reconcile advance payments of emergency benefits. This money flew, as you may remember, to people quickly within the days of applying, and then needed to be reconciled after. Mr. Chair, we have recovered 1.68 billion from more than 1.18 million Canadian as of January 6 from those overpayments. We have the resources to perform these integrity measures. ESDC is committed to completing 157,000 post-payment verification over the 4 years period. It would not be cost-effective nor keeping with international or industry best practices to investigate 100% of potential ineligible claims. I also want to be clear that this approach is evergreen and will adapt it as the circumstances warrant. Il est probable que de nombreux Canadiens aient agi de bonne foi.
It's possible that many Canadians acted out of good faith, although they perhaps were not initially eligible. The identified recipients who were ineligible for CERB or who presented fraudulent applications need to be followed up on.
Thank you all very much. I'm now going to turn to the rounds. I'm going to be fairly judicious with the time because we started a little bit late. So turning now first to Mr. Chambers. No, I have it here. There's too many papers. Mr. Chambers, you have the floor for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Hamilton, welcome back. There was a order paper question about the costs associated with some of the post-verification audits that have been done. What is the amount that's been spent to date? Is it about $1 billion? Is that a number you have handy? That was what was disclosed at the end of last year in November or December.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have the number handy in front of me, but I recall the order paper question. I expect that what's in there is correct.
Do you have an estimate of what the department will spend on post-payment verification between now and when you plan to finish that work?
I don't have that estimate in front of me, but I can get that to you. I know that we're planning to have our post-payment verifications extend out into 2025, so we would have to compute that number based on that.
Thank you. Mr. Tremblay, do you have a similar number that you could share with the committee in writing if you don't have it at your hands? Is that
At the moment, what I can tell you is that we did receive at the beginning 25 million, and we receive an additional $114 million to do post-payment verification. That's, I think, the numbers we have at the moment.
And just to clarify, did I hear you correctly? ESDC is planning to review 100% of the potential ineligible payments under the CERB or under the benefits provided by ESDC?
We have with Revenue Canada, and Mary can explain more, we have done data analysis on all cases because we have information of those people. We have their revenue numbers, for example. So we were able, through that, to find out and to attest if people were meeting some of the criteria.
So is that, hard to keep this all straight, but the Auditor General says there's a certain amount that should be investigated. Are you saying for the amounts that relate to ESDC that you are investigating all of the amounts that the Auditor General... I will not
call it an investigation.
Okay.
I will call it doing data analysis.
Confirmation.
Yeah, okay. Confirmation, and also trying to find out in that pool of 3.7 billion for EI herb, for example, what was the percentage or the numbers of them that had numbers that were not necessarily aligned with the criteria, which could be for good reasons, to be honest, but how many of them actually would be potentially people who receive money they should not have received.
Thank you. Just back to CRA briefly, what's the total amount of payments that have been reviewed to date? Like, how many billions have been reviewed, and you'd consider, we've looked at them, we've confirmed them, we're no longer concerned?
I'm not sure if one of my colleagues has that figure in front of them. If not, we can definitely get it to you in terms of, and we're just talking about the individual benefits here, is that?
I mean, I would prefer it for both, since it's quite a substantial number, and we did discuss this last week. But if there is a discussion about how much we've spent so far, and this is how much we've reviewed, I think that's a reasonable kind of return on investment analysis that one might consider doing.
I'll turn it to Mark Lemieux, my colleague.
So, like it was explained earlier, the agency does business intelligence exercise on all of the cases. And that's how we go by our risk-based approach. So every Canadian that receives an amount through CERB, we assess against the risk factor that we have. So like we've explained for the SUVs early last week, it's the same approach where we look at all of the payments and we assess the risk for all of them. And then we choose which one we will audit.
So here's a different question then. What amounts are you not going to look at on your risk-based approach? How much? Based on your risk-based approach, you're deciding what you're going to look at, correct? So what are you not going to look at?
Mr. Chair, I can start that one, and Mark may not. And I think, as we have said last week and say again now, the compliance efforts are still at early stages, right? So we're going to be continuing these out to 2025. So it's very difficult to know what will be left at the end of the day, because our risk-based approach does get adjusted as we move along. We might see things in a particular audit that we do that points to a risk that maybe we hadn't seen, and so we would adjust our algorithms and our approach going forward. But the point is that at the end of the day, there will probably be some that don't get looked at just because they wouldn't be cost effective for us to go after. But it's very hard to say what that will look like now.
Right, so there's some kind of return of investment discussion happening. Just trying to understand, what's the level of risk that we're taking, or what's the level of non-recoupment of potential ineligible recipients that we're trying to get. So any kind of information that you can provide about how much you've looked at so far, how much you've recovered, what's that look like, and what you're planning to do until, I guess it sounds like 2025 now. That would be very helpful for the committee.
Sure, we can come back to you, Mr. Chair, with more information on that. We do have figures at our disposal about how much has actually been repaid now, how much we've looked at. I think I mentioned last week in the context of the wage subsidy, we've done over, again, it's a graduated approach. We look at everything at the beginning just to see what's there. Then we do audits. We did a pilot phase. We have now done over 4,000 audits. We've got over $15 billion we're looking at the moment, and that will continue for the next few years as we complete the process.
Thank you. That is the time.
We'll put that
I'm sure we'll come back to this line of questioning. Mr. Dong, I believe you are up next. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. First of all, I want to extend my sincere thanks through the staff of CRA to everyone who worked at the front line, who implemented the CRA and the various benefits. And thank you very much. And because I remember vividly the conversation I had with a young individual who was homeless at the time, right? I think it was the first 2 weeks of when COVID hit us. I saw this young man. He was in cold, and I was concerned about him, and I went to buy some food and give it to him, and I asked him, I said, how come you're outside, you're in the shelter? That the shelter was shut down. There were hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals like him at the time in Canada who didn't know what to do. So I remember two things, two feelings I had in my mind. One is, doesn't matter you're a politician, a bureaucrat, or person with a job or without a job, we were equally vulnerable in front of COVID risk without the protection of vaccine at the time, and we were equally important. Our health And safety is equally important because the virus is so contagious, and it could affect anybody in a country. And so to you, Commissioner, can you describe the importance of getting these support out to the public, making sure those Canadians at risk, they don't have to worry about going to work, earn that underpayment to feed their family at a time, and how important it is to Canadians as a whole in the first, say, few months of COVID, when we didn't know enough information about this virus and how to protect Canadians from it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say, obviously, very important to Canadians, and that's reflected in the approach that the government took, attestation-based approach, trying to find ways to get the money to the people who needed it as quickly as possible. Because we were in an extraordinary situation. People were, as you said, in need of these benefits, and one of our main jobs at that moment was to get it out as efficiently as we could. And I think it's been acknowledged that we did a good job of that. Despite the fact that we within the agency, as they were at ESDC, were battling COVID ourselves, amongst our workforce, and it was having an impact on all of us and our lives. And we had to basically have most of the staff work remotely, and that was a different situation. So while we were doing that, we still felt it was really important to have processes in place so that we could get the money out in an efficient and timely manner. And so we did focus a lot on things like making sure that our web page and our application process was as smooth as possible. We definitely had to do some verification up front, and that, as noted by the Auditor General, it was probably a little lighter on verification up front than a normal program for us, but we knew we would have the opportunity to come back afterwards. So I think that was really key for us, and I would just say that it didn't end in those first few months. So even if you start talking about our compliance efforts, as we recognize that maybe some people were getting money that they were ineligible for, we tried to approach that with an empathetic approach and not forgetting about those, but also trying to recognize the sensitive situation that people were in and having that reflected in our compliance efforts.
And at a time when you first decided, or the government decided that people's lives and their safety is number one, did CRA have a sort of a process or system in time that does prepayment verifications? That's something that you can just pick up and start right away in COVID situation. Did you have anything like that?
No, we had to build it, basically. I mean, you can take bits and pieces from things that we have done, but essentially that was part of the challenge for us, is we had to get this system up in an area that we wouldn't normally be administering in a matter of weeks and get them out. So, no, it wasn't like, let's say you were increasing the GST credit or the child benefit. We have a system in place, and we could use that. But for this was something we had to create. And so that's why I say very innovative approaches in terms of how we set up our website, how we set up the application process. But it all had to be stood up very quickly.
Yeah, I think this is a very important point, because we know a lot of Canadians live check to check, and they need their biweekly payments to support their family. And had there been no support at all from the government, from the federal government, say in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and I don't know how these families could have survived COVID, because obviously a lot of business had to shut down or had to be suspended at the time, and without such system in place, was it even possible for CRA to come up with a prepayment verification and at the same time deliver the support as fast as you did?
Yes, it was possible, because the key for us at CRA is also the integrity of the system. So yes, we need to be timely and serve the needs of Canadians, but we have to be concerned about the integrity in the system. And we did have some prepayment controls up front, and we actually changed them over time, reflecting what we were seeing out there. We had an opportunity to improve them, and we did. And at one point in the year, we got tax data from the previous year. That allowed us to go and check the tax information. That was in about July, I think, of that year. So it wasn't like we had it in March of 2020 and then we didn't do anything with it. We evolved it and improved it somewhat. I mean, there still were gaps, and the Auditor General is absolutely right that it wasn't a perfect prepayment system.
And thank you, Mr. Hamilton.
But we did.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think you responded. I'm going to have to. I do want to move things along here, and I'm sure we'll come back to that as well. Suivante, c'est la députée Sinclair Desgagnés. Vous avez la parole pour 6 minutes.
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés, 6 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'd like to thank the witnesses who have appeared today. This is all very important. First of all, I'd like to ask a question about an issue that hasn't really been dealt with to now, but which is very important, and that is identity fraud. And this is a fraudulent use of public monies. I'd like to hear from the Auditor General. I realize on this issue, this is not the primary focus of this study, but first of all, did you note the scale of the amount of money that was diverted? I know that we did list some situations. We know that the departments at EDCC identified cases of fraud, and we're satisfied that they took the necessary measures to address these fraud issues. As you mentioned, there are some, when we found out about individuals that were probably not eligible because they didn't meet the eligibility criteria, well, that could have been a case of fraud and requiring further investigation. But it's also possible that they were honest mistakes that were made. And that's why the first step was to determine who was not eligible and then make a decision whether a follow-up was required to recover the money if necessary. Thank you. In your opinion, could we have done these verifications as we went along? This program began in 2020. Now we're in 2023. Do you not think that we could have done some ongoing verifications in a disciplined manner? Yes and no. We have to remember or recall the situation during the COVID, and we also extend the deadline for tax returns. We didn't have all the information we needed. That we were dealing with personal attestations, and we had to process all kinds of applications. Once we got the information, we saw that the CRA had set up another control to verify the income of taxpayers. But what we also noted during our audit is that they identified payments that were stopped, but they didn't really audit recovery. So we didn't see this control used during the 2020 income tax returns were filed. So I think that the agency needs to do some more procedures with respect to recovery. So in your opinion, or in your report, you said that the agency was behind for meeting certain deadlines, but apparently it's been said that it's too early to determine who received benefits that really weren't eligible. How can you explain this divergence in opinion? I see that, yes, you can't really estimate or know exactly the amounts that have been paid to businesses or individuals without doing a verification. That's why I think they need to increase their efforts in this area, because that's the only way that we'll ever find out whether someone or a business was ineligible or not. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the decision was made to push back or the deadline, and it's a decision that the government made with the information they had at hand. But there's a tax deadline that has to be taken into account, and determining whether there was fraud or not, or an unintentional error. Well, you have to take measures to identify the why before you decide how you go about recovering the money. So just to be clear, is it a question of means or will to explain why there's been such a delay in verifications? I can't talk about intent. I think that's a question that needs to be put to the Deputy Minister. I see that they were missing information, but I would have liked to have seen programs and controls adjusted while the programs were ongoing. Thank you. So I have a question for Mr. Hamilton. Is it a question of means or will? Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a question I would respond to by saying we put forward our best efforts. There was a little bit more of an incentive for people to be fraudulent, but we did take some steps. Once we saw that people were trying to commit fraud, we had a fraud tip line, and we also blocked some accountants because we suspected that there was fraud involved. So there's a lot of will here. But yes, there was an increase in fraud. I'm sorry. Your time is up. Now, Mr. Desjardins, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank all the witnesses for being present with us today. I do want to start by just mentioning how concerned I am in regards to an audit like this, one that I think puts regular working class, middle class Canadians in the crosshairs of the CRA, especially in light of our testimony from the commissioner last week in relation to my question of corporate tax avoidance. You know, we're facing a unique issue here where we have limited resources. There's a finite of resources, as much as we'd like to think about the CRA being able to do everything and all things. The reality is it's a finite resource, and the folks who were able to administer these supports during that time did a remarkable job being able to get supports to regular Canadians, working class Canadians, middle class Canadians, at a time when a lot of folks were really nervous about what the tomorrow was going to look like. I just want to kind of back up a second and remind folks that this was a time where our economy literally came to a standstill. We had folks who didn't know how to pay rent. We had parents who are now with their kids couldn't go to work. We had serious interruptions in the everyday life of Canadians. Canadians are really scared about what they were going to do if they lost their job. During that time, folks might remember this was one of the only lifelines for folks who would otherwise lose their homes, lose their cars, lose so much because they weren't getting paid. And so this critical support was important for thousands of Canadians. And yes, some folks made mistakes. That is a true fact. Many folks made mistakes. But these, in many ways, are honest mistakes. Honest mistakes of folks who were scared. And with the limited resources at the CRA, we can't avoid the fact that we have billions of dollars, billions of corporate tax avoidance. We talked last week when the CRA commissioner was here, about the numbers, $4 to $7 billion in lost revenue between 2014 to 2018 in corporate tax avoidance. That's money that should be going to schools, hospitals, roads, our public healthcare system, real things Canadians rely on. And so when we're talking about the efficacy, efficiency of our CRA systems and the systems that Canadians should be trusting, This is some of the questions Canadians have. When I go and talk to folks about what's the most important thing on the CRA's agenda, yeah, CERB gets brought up for sure. You know, the CERB payments. Some people, of course, took those payments when they weren't eligible to. And our tax laws should permit fairness in that. The Auditor General made mention about the importance of making sure there's tax fairness. But where is the tax fairness when it comes to some of these corporations that are gouging Canadians billions of dollars? So I just want to put that on the record here today to talk about what we're really talking about. We're trying to recoup funding that Canadians are owed, and some of the biggest losses are by corporations who are avoiding to pay their taxes. I asked the CRA commissioner last week about how we can prioritize this, particularly because the CRA was already doing so much work. This was during 2004, 2018. There was a capacity issue trying to get that tax avoidance going. Then COVID, and now this. I'm concerned about the capacity here and how CRA is actually going to be able to do the work of making sure that all of these cases can be reviewed. And if it becomes a question of which ones we have to prioritize, I say we go after the ones where the opportunity costs are greatest, and that's with corporations. We talked about the opportunity costs here, and I'll make a question maybe directed to the CRA about some of that opportunity costs. My question, of course, would be to Commissioner Hamilton. So you might remember during our meeting just last week, you acknowledged that there's an opportunity cost to where the CRA applies its limited resources, and that corporate Canada is dodging billions of dollars in taxes every single year. So how do we actually square that circle? How do we focus on both recovering the pandemic benefits while also making sure that these corporations that have largely benefited during the same time where regular working class and middle class folks were suffering, how do we actually make sure we have the kind of capacity that the CRA needs in order to do its job in a credible way that Canadians can trust in considering both cases? One where we have billions of dollars of tax avoidance in this area. You know, the opportunity cost for going after that would be great for Canadians versus going after little old ladies who may be over their limit. You know, when the New Democrats fought for this plan, we fought to actually use the tax system to be able to do this. Much easier system, you know, in the model of our guaranteed basic livable income work, making sure that we use the existing tax system to recoup some of that funds. You know, those would have been good solutions, and now we're dealing with this. So, you know, I digress in some ways. So to Commissioner Hamilton, how has your department been monitoring since the 2018 to 2022 some of the corporate tax avoidance?
How much time I have? That's fine.
It's nothing personal. You've got about 50 seconds.
Okay.
And a few seconds longer if you're wrapping up. But
No.
I have been going over, and I paused right there. So
that's fine.
Back to you, sir.
That's fine. Thank you for the question. The first thing I would say is we can do all of that. We have received a lot of resources over the years, the recent years, to battle tax evasion internationally and in Canada, and that's a big part of our agenda. And we take that fairness, integrity agenda quite seriously. And we have resources to make sure that we ensure the integrity of the COVID benefits. The one thing that I would say is we actually compute the tax gap each year now. We're one of the jurisdictions in the world that does that. So that gives that's a transparency of what we compute as being how much tax is being collected relative to what could be collected. So that's one contribution. But the big thing that I just wanted to put in is this is not just a Canadian issue. This is a global issue. And one of the key things that we're doing is working with our partners in other countries to try to make sure that we're sharing information and we're working collectively, because often these are multinationals that we need to get to. I think that's the place where we're making potentially the biggest strides, but it is a very complex area and we don't get results overnight. But I do feel like we're taking very seriously both of those
Thank
agendas.
You.
Thank you, Commissioner.
That ends our first round. I will give witnesses a little hint. I tend to turn my microphone on, a little red light, when the time's out, and I do allow you to finish your thoughts, which runs over, which I'll continue to do until my colleagues tell me to stop doing that and to cut it at 6 or 5 minutes exactly. But just a little hint: when you see my red mic go off, that means the red light's blinking. Turning now to Mr. McCall, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Welcome back, witnesses. Mr. Hamilton, I want to get back to kind of a theme I was asking when you were with us last time. Like, who made the decision to use like a self-attestation, a very limited prepayment controls, especially knowing this would lead to very large eligibility problems? Was it a decision of the department, or was it a political decision?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. That was a decision by the government. I think, approved in Parliament.
Did you advise the government that it would be very high risk of ineligible payments?
I think it was well recognized that you would increase the risk. I don't usually talk about the advice I give to the government
But it was well
public,
recognized.
but I think it is recognized that if you do that, take that kind of an approach, you are increasing risk, and then you have to have a comfort with that or a plan to mitigate the risk.
Could we have done it differently without just an open-ended self-attestation that left such a large risk for taxpayers? And I understand the whole goal of it's emergency, get it out, et cetera, but could we have done it differently with a bit better prepayment controls?
It's hard for me to see a better way, and at the time, recognizing where we were, and if you look at what other countries have done around the world in that same circumstance, they adopted, their own variants of these kinds of programs. So, could some things have been done a bit better on our part? Others, yes, potentially, but we were all kind of working very hard to get this out and to get the money into the hands of people right away. I think we were cognizant of the risks and the necessity to come back and check at the end of the day, but it's hard for me, but I'm only one person to think of what that better way might have been.
There's a prepayment control ad in September 2020. The claim blocked about 700,000 unwarranted applicants. What was that prepayment control added that blocked the 700,000?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I'll turn to one of my colleagues, Mark Lemieux. He can explain in a bit more detail what we did there.
So what we did there is that we just received the income information from the previous year, 2019. So what we decided to do was to block the applicants where we were seeing that they were not eligible because they were not meeting the minimum income of $5,000, and we were asking them to contact us to be able to provide us the information showing that they were eligible before we would make a payment. So that's what we've called the prepayment validation step.
And we couldn't have done that when we started this using T4 submission information or like payroll submission, or no?
The time when the program was launched, the most recent information we had was for the 2018 year.
2018. Okay. Was there a specific decision maker to add these controls in the summer of 2020, or did it just come up organically? Mr. Hamilton talked about there was some new intelligence and data came up. Like, were there some red flags popped up, or what made you decide to add the controls?
Well, I would say, yes, that was a decision that we took. And you have to remember
when we say we, do you mean the CRA?
Yeah.
Or did you have to get approval from the government to make the changes?
That's right. That would be our decision. We informed others. But you have to remember how this was set up. You only had to have that $5,000 income in the previous year or the most recent 12 months, and we only had 2018 information because people hadn't filed their 2019 form yet.
So post-2018 then, you're saying there's no ability for the government to know what people had earned or making to verify their
filed
claims?
Their tax returns.
So there's no other way unless people do their tax return that the government would know?
No obviously easy way that I can think of, and that's where our best source of information.
No easy way or no way?
I don't know. Off the top of my head, I can't think of another way, but maybe there is one. But also in that year, if I could just add,
I just have time for one last question, Mr. Hamilton. You know that you've got almost 1 million notices of redetermination sent with thousands more. How many thousands more? Like, you have 960,000 sent. Is it a couple thousand more? Is it 100,000 more?
Why don't you let the witness answer the question? Go ahead, Mr. Hamilton.
Let me finish the question.
Well, you had. I can
Mr.
cut the
Chair,
time
my
off.
time is my
all right,
time.
All right, Mr. McCauley, I'm trying to help you get an answer in the time without cutting off the witnesses. And you asked him a question. We don't need to hear the. We didn't. I don't need to hear numbers coming in your head. I'd like to hear from Mr. Hamilton. Mr. Hamilton, you got about 20.
Sorry, point of order, Mr. Chair.
What is the actual point of order, not an argument, Mr.
Okay, my
McCauley?
time is my time.
Okay.
I had 15 seconds left.
Very good.
I was finishing my question. I don't need you to interrupt me to finish my question to the witness.
Very good. Mr. Hamilton?
Okay, well, I'm going to defer to Mark so you can get a quick answer to how many more thousands will we have?
Expired. Turning now to Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, I'd like to thank Ms. Hogan and Mr. Hamilton for returning again to our committee, and welcome Monsieur Tremblay. Thank you. So my question is to Mr. Hamilton. In Scarborough, Agincourt, and many ridings across Canada, there were many families, particularly with those who had extra caregiving responsibilities, whether it was for children or aging family members. They relied on these CERB payments to pull them through the pandemic. For individuals living from paycheck to paycheck, when that paycheck suddenly stopped, it was really important that benefits be delivered quickly. If the CRA had conducted prepayment verifications, how much longer would these families have had to wait for benefits? In your experience, what also impact would that have had on these families and individuals?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. It certainly depends on the type of extra prepayment step you put in. Some are more severe than others. But there was no doubt that the more that we put friction in the system or ask for extra checks, it was going to delay things because it would often be a manual exercise that we would have to do within the CRA. And the more we can automate things, the better. So manual exercises delay. And I would just say, for example, through the period, we talked about fraud earlier, we did notice that there were instances where we were suspicious of fraud, and so we held and blocked payments while we did the check, and maybe in some cases forced people to call us.
Excuse me, Mr. Hamilton. Could I just interrupt? We're just having a little trouble with the sound. I want to have the clerk make a request, which is to lower this or lower the sound.
Apologies. If you could just lower the sound of your earpiece. It seems to make creating an echo with the, the microphone.
Feedback, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I was just talking about the fraud circumstance where we had to block some activity or force people to call us, and that meant that people couldn't get their payment for 3 or 4 days, and or instead of getting it 3 to 4 days, they would get it 8 to 10 days or maybe not at all. So we noticed that people didn't like that, obviously, and waiting for it at a time when they really wanted money. So that's the kind of balance that we always had to go through during that period. How do you make sure you get the money out as quickly, as efficiently as possible, but at the same time protect the integrity? And so as you start adding additional checks into it, checks in the sense of verifications, it just increases the time. And, it just depends, though. If you had gone further and had even more verification, obviously the time would have extended. And at that moment in time, there was really a premium on trying to get things out the door.
How many families or individuals were impacted in that blockage, in that fraud blockage? Was it a great amount?
Sorry, I just didn't catch the last part.
What were the numbers for the families that had to wait a while?
Oh, maybe I see Mark has the number, so.
So progressively, we blocked up to 700,000 applicants, individual applicants.
Mr. Tremblay, in your opening statement, you mentioned that ESDC had sent about 55,000 fact-finding letters to potentially ineligible recipients. Funds were recovered from 32,609 people who received these letters, which, according to my calculations, means that about 60% of people who received the letters ended up paying back money. That sounds like a really good response rate, especially since the recipients were only potentially ineligible. Can you elaborate more about this process?
Yes, of course I can. And as I mentioned, we also sent 1.8 million letters to people who received the lump sum payment and should not have received it. And there's already close to 1.2 million of them who started reimbursed or have reimbursed. So that's actually a positive. In this case, the way we've done it is we look at all of them, as I mentioned at the beginning with the data analysis, and we end up with a pool of more than 550,000 people where you could see that there's maybe differences between the eligibility criteria and the amount of money they're having. This is the pool of people we're looking at and now we have to determine, I'll give you an example, $5,000 revenue. They have to have made $5,000 revenue. So we may have people who didn't make $5,000 revenue, but got maybe one payment. So do you go after people like that? You gotta have to assess how much time you're gonna spend on this. So that's the kind of analysis we've done. So the 55,000 are the first one where we have a kind of a good reason to believe that there's money there that should be reimbursed. And so, yes, we're starting having response that is actually quite positive. We'll see if it's going to continue like that with all of them. But our objective is really to focus on the ones where we think that there is actually reasons to believe that it could be in good faith, but it's a significant gap from meeting.
And thank you. Thank you very much. Maintenant encore, Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, vous avez la...
Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés, you have 2.5 minutes. You're on mute. Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. I'll try to be as brief as possible, but something is bothering me a great deal. And this, since the latest exchange, I understand Mr. Hamilton when he says that recovering money and the delays, and I do understand that he's saying that we've not been able to recover several $1 million. But we have to remember something that's very important. If the CERB was created, it's because we had an EI system that is completely inefficient. So today, we have an opportunity. We have, perhaps Mr. Tremblay could go into the need for the EI reform that has been called for by all opposition parties so that workers have a really good system. I'm an economist. We know that we have a recession on the horizon, and we know that Quebecers and Canadians deserve a proper EI system. So further to the pandemic, are reforms coming? Listen, what we learned from this crisis, well, we have known for years that we need to work on EI accessibility and modernize the system. We have taken temporary measures or took temporary measures while the pandemic was ongoing to facilitate measures. We have consulted about reforming EI, and it will be up to the government to decide when and where and come forward with more details. But I would invite you, and I'm sure that you've already done this, I would invite you to look at the report on commitments. Yes, you talk about consultation, but we're not talking about the same thing here. In 2020, 25 million. Well, there are all kinds of money that's been paid on benefits. So there's a lot of consultation that's been done with the private sector, but there's no positive consequences that have resulted from this. So that's a problem. I think my time is up. No, thank you.
No. On a un expert ici.
We have an expert here.
Or for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I do want to just pick up where I left off just in relation to, the capacity at CRA. You mentioned that you're at full capacity. You have the power and ability to investigate every single one of these claims. But yet, of course, Canadians are still seeing issues in relation to what they feel should be owed to them, which is, of course, the massive corporate tax avoidance dollars that should be going to our public systems. in regards to that, I think it's important to know and to qualify your statement, Mr. Commissioner, when you say that. Money is, of course, one of those resources that the government has been able to increase the CRA's operations and capacity for. But the question still remains, is it enough, particularly if we're thinking about the existing tax avoidance, the levels that it's at? It'd be helpful for me, and I think on behalf of Canadians across the country, to know exactly what you're doing in relation to that tax avoidance, and to understand that whether or not it's growing or diminishing with your strategies in relation to the numbers I cited between 2014 and 2018. What do the numbers look like for 2018 and 2020 in terms of corporate tax avoidance?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I don't have that figure that you requested right in front of me. Well, I should say that when we do our tax gap analysis, it's always a few years behind because it takes a while to assemble all the data for that. But I would say that we've made quite a bit of progress, and I would say for two reasons, and I hinted at this in my earlier response. First, we have received a lot of additional resources over the last number of years, specifically to improve our auditing of offshore activity and tax avoidance and evasion. So though we've put those resources to good use, hiring more auditors, improving our technology, because part of this is also getting the technology that we need to put the pieces together for some of these international schemes. So the money that we have received has been helpful. I mean, to your point, could we do more with more money? Sure. But I guess in the sense of trying to strike a balance of all the different things that needs to get done with the government's money, I feel comfortable that we are well-resourced in this area. And when I look at my colleagues around the world, I think that we're in the ballpark. The second thing, though, that I would say, and I've referenced it, is we can't do this alone, because what we find, and all of the countries around find, is that you can close off something, but it just shows up in another place. So we need to be able to have mechanisms to share information on multinationals and high net worth individuals. And we're really improving in that space over the last number of years as a group of, say, OECD countries and a bit broader. And indeed, recently you've seen the OECD put out some pretty aggressive prospects for changing the global tax system, a corporate minimum tax that would apply, that all countries have signed on to, and a way of taxing the platform.
Right there,
so
Mr.
those
Hamilton.
are the kinds of initiatives
I appreciate
that are
it.
going to help us.
Mr. Perkins, thank you for joining us today. You've got the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, witnesses. I'm going to give you a minute and do a little preamble. I'm going to talk to you about the fish harvesters benefit. Well, it's not possible, apparently, in your testimony today to get every nickel of misused, abused, prisoner served money back. You're going very aggressively at hardworking fishermen. So the reason that fishermen had a special program during COVID is because generally they don't qualify for employment insurance. And they don't qualify for employment insurance because almost 99% of fishermen get paid since the days of Moby Dick and before in whaling on a percentage share of the catch. They do not get paid a wage. And they'll go out and they'll have days and they'll have weeks where they won't have any income and weeks where they'll have lots of income. And their records of employment, which Service Canada, everybody has, and you guys have, shows that. Now, the original application form on the Government of Canada's website, which is no longer up, it got altered about 6 months into the program, had 4 categories for fishermen to check in the process. It had self-employed commercial fisher, self-employed commercial freshwater harvester, Indigenous fish harvester designated as equivalent to an enterprise head under a communal commercial fishing license, and a share person, crew member who earns a share of the revenue. A share person. You are eligible if you are a share person, which 99% of fishermen are. And we're talking about people in the lobster fishery who lost a considerable amount of income as world markets dried up like other industries and had no income. Even though they went out fishing, there was no income because there was no market for the product. And that's why the special program get made. Now, I've got quotes from many of my constituents who are having this aggressively clawed back from CRA, who don't understand why, when their income was down anywhere from 13 to 75%, CRA, who says on the form that if you are a share person, you're eligible for this benefit, why you are clawing it back.
Sure, I'll be able to. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be pleased to answer the question to the extent that I can. The fish harvester benefit was jointly delivered by Service Canada and by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. Yes, for recovery activities, CRA does have roles related to the recovery of most government-related overpayments, but it was jointly delivered by Service Canada and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans.
Yeah, I understand that. I have limited time, but I don't want to hear that circle again. And I raised this in the House 6 months ago when the Minister of Fisheries said, I just designed the program, don't talk to me. When I asked the Revenue Minister's office, and I have a letter back from the Minister of Revenue's office, you guys probably signed off on it, it says, don't talk to us, we just collect the taxes, talk to Service Canada, like you just said. So when we sent a letter to the Minister of Service Canada, they said, don't talk to us, we just administer it, go back to Fisheries who set up the program. So I'm caught we're all caught in a catch-22 where everybody says, don't ask me why this is happening, I just work here. So I don't want to hear the excuse that says somebody else is responsible for the program. You set up a program that said they were eligible, their incomes were down 75%, you're clawing it back from these folks, but prisoners and dead people and kids who stayed at home and lived with their parents get to keep their CERB. Explain to me why.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. By no means was I suggesting and trying to reflect that Service Canada does not have a significant role related to the delivery of the fish harvester benefit. It was jointly us and DFO. Regarding your specific questions that you have, if you would be so kind to provide them to us, certainly I would be glad to make sure that we follow up.
I've done that for 18 months. 18 months I've been going at Revenue Canada, at Fisheries, and at Service Canada, and I get nothing but baffle gab back that it's somebody else's fault. A simple show of a record of employment, which you guys all nodded when you said record of employment. Here is one. I can show you many. They're blacked out for privacy reasons. A fisherman, 9,000. That's why they got a special program. Why don't you use the record of employment to determine their eligibility rather than whether or not they fill out the income line in the income tax box versus the fishing benefit one? These are guys that don't have accounts.
Thank you, Mr. Perkins. I'd like to get an answer and a brief answer, please.
Thank you. So, as I said, if you could provide, you have my name, you have my coordinates. By all means, if you would provide those, I absolutely will commit. We will get back to you with a direct answer. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And as a member from Atlantic Canada, I look forward to that response as well. Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Tremblay, would you say that the benefits were overall successful at targeting Canadians most affected by the pandemic?
Yes, I would. And my understanding is also you can read in the Auditor General's report. There's many elements that are mentioning that. I think at the beginning, the objective was to go fast and to the people who are most in need. And if you look at the numbers, it's amazing how it went exactly where it had to go. Give you a few examples for you. Poverty, without the benefit and with the benefit, it's a gap of 5% that is assessed on what it would have been. If you look at individual groups who receive the benefit, the groups that we know are marginalized are the ones who get a higher percentage of the benefit. Their population overrepresented. It's not overrepresented because they should not have received it. It's just because we knew that they were on needs. If you look at women, if you look at Indigenous people, if you track where the money went from a geographic perspective and where the high spot, if I could say, of the pandemic were, you could see also that it goes with it. So there's no doubt in my mind that the benefits were efficient for this because they actually went where we wanted them to go. And that's not something that is that easy to do sometimes. And also the way the economy came back after the pandemic also demonstrate that actually the benefit were beneficial for the society.
Right. Well, thank you. It was certainly an extraordinary situation calling for extraordinary means. So what lessons do you think we should take from the CRA's experience in delivering CERB and other emergency benefits during a time of crisis. It's always important to learn. So what is the learning here?
I think the learning for us is we need to continue to build on this because, to be honest, we built a bit the airplane as we were starting flying with it. So that, you know, as the commissioner mentioned, the pre-payments measures were not all there, and we built them up as we were going on. We start with CERB and EIR, making sure there was a single window approach and two process going on. I think for us, it's amazing on how what we've learned from this is the capacity to be flexible and the capacity to be innovative in times of crisis, and we need to keep that. On the other side, you know, it was mentioned, how much time does it take to have data from the past and all this. Those are areas where, and you mentioned, I think the Auditor General talked about the e-pay rule and some initiatives in the future. Those are elements, technology and all this, that would be very helpful on making sure that our systems are as flexible and nimble as they should be to address crises when they happen.
CRA officials go into more depth in discussing the flexibilities available to low-income Canadians who have CERB debt. We've heard a lot about collecting the overpayments back. So how is the CRA ensuring it proceeds in an empathetic and compassionate manner while ensuring that we maintain the integrity of the fiscal system? I know it's quite a delicate balancing act there.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Maybe just before I answer that, just to tag on to what Jean-Francois said, there were a lot of lessons to be learned. Everything wasn't perfect. We actually produced a paper that we gave to the committee, and I think ESDC did as well. So it's important to learn those lessons, and the Auditor General's report is another example of lessons that we can learn. So hopefully we won't have another pandemic like this, but I think there's some good lessons there that we can use. When you talk about the flexibilities, so once we determined that somebody was ineligible for the benefit, to say the CERB, we contact that person, tell them that they weren't eligible, and if they need help, if they're in financial hardship, then we have an ability to, not to eliminate the debt, but to come up with a payment plan that suits their circumstances. So we engage in a discussion with them, again, trying to be empathetic to whatever financial situation they are in, because we know that if we go and try to get all that money right away, it's not going to work. But usually, and this is Mark Lemieux, his team, that are engaged with the taxpayer and try to strike that balance between, yes, make sure we get the money, but can we be flexible in terms of how we get it, when we get it? And we have a fair amount of success with that, and we call that our empathetic approach that we were doing before the pandemic, but we really became important as we move into this pandemic compliance effort.
Okay.
You have time for a comment, really not a question.
Okay, well, I appreciate all the hard work that all the departments involved have done. I mean, I think it was heroic efforts accomplishing almost an impossible task under very trying circumstances. So I thank you all for what you've done.
Thank you, Ms. Bradford. I appreciate it. Turning now to our next round, going to Mr. Cram. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. I would like to start with the Auditor General. I would like to read a couple of quotes from the bottom of page 32 and the top of page 33 of the report. It says, during the audit, we were told that Employment and Social Development Canada and the Canada Revenue Agency had identified cases and referred some of them to law enforcement for investigation. And then a couple of points later, it says, as of September 2022, the agency and the department had identified employees that claimed COVID-19 benefits. Is that to say that CRA and ESDC employees were referred to law enforcement for criminal investigation?
So yes, there were employees in Canada Revenue Agency and Employment and Social Development Canada that were identified having received payments, and there was an internal investigation that kicks off first. It's then up to the department and the agency whether they refer that case to law enforcement. But we felt that that investigation was the right first step.
Okay, well then I guess I will ask the witnesses from the CRA and ESDC how many employees were subject to internal investigation and how many cases were referred to law enforcement?
I guess maybe I'll back up for 1 second, just to say that when we look at the CRA, we treat public servants as general taxpayers, and if you violate the rules, you suffer the compliance efforts. So I don't have numbers right in front of me, not very many, obviously, and I don't believe any of those cases have gone into a criminal investigation. We have very strong internal investigation at the CRA, and we deal with it ourselves, and the discipline can range from not much, if it wasn't something, to termination.
May I just interject? I appreciate that answer, Mr. Hamilton. Could you provide this committee with the numbers? I'm afraid that not very many is not a sufficient answer. Would you be able to provide to this committee afterwards the number that were subject to the internal investigation?
Let me take that back, and I'll endeavor to get you those numbers.
Thank you.
And the same question to ESDC.
I'd be happy to answer that question. And so as part of some of our internal investigations, it was discovered that some of our employees had availed themselves, as any Canadian, to apply for CERB benefits on their own time. So I want to make it clear they did not use any internal systems in doing so. We did alert that up to our Chief Security Officer, and an administrative investigation did take place. Those individuals that did break the trust of the employer-employee relationship, as we reviewed for cause their security clearances, have been terminated. To date, we have terminated 49 individuals.
Okay, so just so that I'm clear, 49 now former employees of ESDC were terminated for fraud related to COVID benefits. Is that correct?
It would be in regards to misrepresentation of their situation when they would be applying for CERB.
Okay. And how many of those cases were referred to law enforcement?
There was no referral to law enforcement, as this was an internal investigation, and it was a review for cause in regards to breaking the code of conduct associated to the employees of all of our department.
And have the monies that those 49 employees received been clawed back, or are those still part of the ongoing investigations?
Those monies have been established as overpayments that must be repaid, and they are being treated as any other Canadian that received benefits they were not entitled to.
Okay, they must be repaid, but have they already been repaid?
They're in the process of being repaid. I would have to confirm the numbers that have been repaid.
Yes, could you please provide those numbers in writing to the committee?
Absolutely. Okay. And I know your earlier question was in regards to those external clients that perhaps demonstrated some fraudulent activities. We did discover that there was some fraudulent activities that did need to be referred to external authorities, and 12,000 of those cases were referred.
All right. And Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
15 seconds.
About 15 seconds. Okay.
So really a comment.
Okay. Well, then I guess I will leave it at that, and we'll see if I get another round by the end of the meeting. So.
You might very well.
Okay.
Turning out to Mr. Fragaskatos, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you to officials for being here today. I want to first pose questions to Mr. Hamilton, and I do have something for ESDC as well, to Mr. Tremblay. Mr. Hamilton, if we look at the report, early on in the report, it goes into the number of recipients that were ineligible for access to programs. Again, early on, it's the number is close to 18%. 17.9% of recipients were ineligible. Further down, I'm looking at so that was on page 39. Page 47, 8.7% of recipients were ineligible. And then furthermore, on page 69, only 0.5% of recipients were ineligible. So there's a lot of shifts here. What's this all about? What does that reflect?
Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. And what it reflects is something that we've mentioned earlier, which is us improving our prepayment controls as we go along. Because these programs, one that didn't know at the time how long they were going to last or what subsequent programs would be there. But as they stayed on for a while, we developed additional tools to be able to have better prepayment control. We learned, as Jean-Francois said, we were flying the plane as we were fixing it. And so this table is actually a reflection of that. As you see, at the very beginning, there was more that was going out that wasn't getting caught by prepayment controls. And then as time went by, they were becoming more effective. As you say, 17.9 went down to 0.5 by the time we got to the lockdown benefit. So that's really what was driving that. There was an element, too, of additional data that came in that allowed us to do our work better. I think we talked earlier about we got the income tax filings from 2019. But it really is just a reflection of us gaining experience with the programs and putting in place some better controls to have less money go out the door before we were comfortable with it.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure that process was made easier by the fact that at the outset of the pandemic and in the peak periods, it would be difficult to put in place those controls at once. But as things eased, there was a greater opportunity to use the word learn and implement particular controls to the point where things. Again, I cited the number, and you repeated it, 0.5% of those that applied were ineligible, down from close to 18%. So that whole experience of getting through the worst parts of the pandemic into a situation where things turned more normal obviously would have helped as well, I would think.
Well, yeah, definitely. Thanks for the question. That would be a factor as well. But I think it's important to recognize, even in the prepayment world, we were learning and we were getting better. And I think that's part of our message on the post-payment compliance is we have our risk-based approach, we have our algorithms, we use our intelligence, and we get better at the compliance as we see different things happening and say there may be something here that we need to put into our program. So I think it's that we always learn as we go with any compliance efforts, whether it's prepayment or post, but what you're seeing here is that learning, potentially a changing environment as well, as you say.
So go into that a little more, the learning. How does that process unfold exactly? What does that look like? Are you engaging with our officials, I should say, within CRA, engaging with one another, taking a look at what else is possible, having conversations, perhaps looking at what other countries are doing? How does that all come together? How does that learning
Thank you for that question. And maybe I'll just ask if one of my colleagues wants to go in detail, but I think it's basically all of the above.
Exactly. And I have to say that the agency worked very closely with the SDC. So the risk that we were identifying, listening to leads, for example, that we would receive from external stakeholders, looking at the business intelligence that we were able to acquire, that's how we developed those methods. And then when we do the actual audits, we see if our business intelligence is right, and then we adjust to make sure that we go after the most the case where there's more risk.
Thank you very much. Another minute, Mr. Chair? Or
no, I'm afraid you have time for a 3-second comment. So
no. Well, Mr. Tremblay, if there's another opportunity, I'll come straight to you, I promise. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Maintenant encore, Madame Séclair Desgagnés, vous avez la parole pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
2.5 minutes, Ms. Sinclair Desgagnés. Mr. Tremblay, you seemed a bit confused when I referred to the reform of EI. Are you aware that, Madame, that the minister has made a commitment to this? We are in 2023. Where are you with this? Yes, of course I'm aware of this. I'm not confused when it comes to EI reform. It's just that it wasn't the scope of the meeting here. But as you know, Consultations have been held, and it will be up to the government to decide when and where it wants to, and how it wants to do this. You're quite wrong when you say that this wasn't an issue under the purview of the AG. We have these problems because we have a bad EI system. We have a very rigid system, and when Quebecers or Canadians need benefits, well, it's very cumbersome. And we know that billions of dollars have been spent improperly, and we'll never get it back. And that is, in fact, the subject of today's meeting. And I would be interested in knowing whether you are aware of these reform consultations. I'm happy that you know about this, but is it a question of when, or is it still in progress and we don't know exactly when these reforms will be ready? It's up to the government to answer that question, not me, but I can tell you that, first of all, we had 15 times more applications during the first month than we normally get for EI. So no system would have been able to cope with this high volume. This was a crisis that we had never seen beforehand, and not in Canadian history. People needed this money. We needed exceptional measures. Exceptionals, but with a system that had worked well to begin with, we would have had fewer cases of fraud, and we would have had a system that was better adapted to the needs of the people. When you say that it's a crisis that's never occurred before, well, employment insurance in Canada is quite archaic as a system. That's the least that can be said. Are certain aspects of this reform, or at least can we find out any information about this reform, or is that inconceivable? It's up to the government to answer that question. And that's it. Thank you. Mr. Desjardins, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I'd like to now move to what I think is probably on the top of mind for most Canadians who took CERB, was the fact that the recommendations by government members were to apply, even if in some cases the eligibility criteria may not have been clear and maybe even arbitrary at times, they were told to apply. And this is a fact that we've seen messaging right across the board to regular Canadians who were suffering and who needed help. And part of a government's responsibility is to, as the Auditor General puts it, be very clear. And I think in this process of recouping or clawing back some of this, I think it's also fair to talk about the reality that they were encouraged to do this. They were encouraged to apply, even at times when asking their own MPs whether or not they were eligible, and at times that they weren't, they were told to continue to apply, that this was an emergency, that we're all in this together, and that we're going to get through it together. Well, to be frank, it seems as though we're prepared to abandon many, many Canadians, even at a time when an affordability crisis right now is pinching harder than many, many years in its past. It's true that the pandemic, of course, and the major effects of the pandemic on our economy are certainly passing, but not for everyone. And for many regular working class Canadians, it's only making things worse. And so my question is to the Auditor General, how do you square that circle in the fact that the advice to the public at that time was to apply and to make sure that they had the support they needed rather than go into poverty? And I know your report makes some mention of that, but it's not explicit to the fact that the government incentivized people's application to this program. And so how do we actually balance that between the reality that we need to be fair with our tax laws, but also the reality that Canadians were told to apply, even at times when the eligibility criteria may have been confusing? Your audit didn't go into details of the encouragement or process of the communication of this program. Why not?
And you got 30 seconds, please.
Okay. So I would acknowledge that the pandemic was very difficult and continues to be very difficult on so many Canadians. And the questions that you're asking me are a policy question. So it's entirely up to the government to make a decision whether or not they want to investigate further or look to recover payments under the current tax system. Any individual or business that receives something that they are not entitled to should be paid back. And my audit was carried without...
To be able to understand that the government incentivized this, even against, at times, their the eligibility.
Mr. Desjardins, that is the time. We are now over the time. Going to Mr. Chambers, please. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Hogan, you said in a couple different forums that you would hope that CRA would be more transparent. What do you mean by that?
Well, we've identified some instances in our audit report, and I would point you probably to paragraph 97, where their business intelligence identified a little over 2 billion recipients or 2 million recipients that are potentially ineligible based on their own business intelligence, but only a fraction of those are communicated with or followed up on, and that's what I mean about being transparent. If you believe that 2 million individuals did not meet a criteria, reaching out to all of them is the fair way to treat a taxpayer. And there's 2 steps to the process. First, identifying who is ineligible or not, and then making a decision about recovery. And all of those need to be decisions that are clear and transparent. I can point to even an issue at the beginning of the pandemic when there was concern over net versus gross for self-employed individuals for $5,000. And there was a lot of confusion and there was no clarity, and the government clearly came out and said, gross is fine. And so it's that kind of clarity that I think every Canadian, whether they be an individual or business, is looking to find. Will you be asking me to repay or not? Was I eligible or not?
Thank you. Based on the level of post-payment activity that you've seen, or verification activity that you've seen, do you think that the use of the attestation-based approach is reasonable now that we know that there's going to be a lot of post-payment verification activity that may not occur? So had we known now the level of post-payment verification activity that has taken place so far and may not occur, do you think, on balance, the attestation-based approach would have made sense at the time?
Again, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and to put ourselves all back in 2020, there was a lot of uncertainty, and there was a need to have people stay home to help support our health system, to help protect Canadians. And the decision made to rely on attestation was a very reasonable one in the unprecedented circumstances. But it has to come with rigorous post-payment work, and that's why I continue to repeat that I'm concerned about the little amount of post-payment work that's being carried out.
So you wouldn't call the post-payment work rigorous at this point?
I don't believe there's enough being done, no.
It's been mentioned, I believe, by Mr. Tremblay that the attestation-based approach is a public sector best practice in times of emergency. I have not been able to find that same organization say that in times of not emergency, that attestation-based approach is appropriate. Would you agree?
The international best practice that we quoted in both of my audits around the individual payments, saying the time of emergency, relying on attestation is very acceptable with rigorous post-payment verification.
It's relevant because the new dental and rental benefits that the government's distributing are relying on attestation-based approach, but we are no longer in a emergency situation. Would you agree with that?
Well, I do think that we're still feeling as a country in many sectors, and many individuals and businesses are still feeling the enduring effects of the pandemic. But the questions around designing other policies that I haven't studied, I can't really comment on.
So you think it's reasonable to use an attestation-based approach in a time of non-emergency? Is that?
I pointed to an international best practice that calls for it in time of emergencies.
Okay. For the CRA, how do you respond to this time of emergency? Are we in a time of emergency? Why do we have to continue to rely on attestation-based approach, which is now we see resulting in significant amounts of costs associated with post-payment verification work?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first thing that I would say is I'm confident that at the end of the day, people will find our compliance efforts to be rigorous in this space on the COVID benefits. We are taking the risk-based approach. We're taking the time to do it. We're finding the places where we need to look. So it's early days, But that's what I expect, because that's something we take seriously. I don't, it's more of a policy question, I suppose, as to whether an attestation-based approach is right in a non-emergency environment. I would just say not all attestation-based programs are created equally. There are some that have greater ties to information that you have at your disposal, and I would use the dental program as an example of that. So I'm not getting into the question of whether attestation is appropriate in non-emergency times, but if you look at the dental program, we have information on the person's tax filing, we have information on the children involved through the Canada Child Benefit. So, you know, it's a bit tighter, I suppose I would put it that way.
Thank you
just caution
very much. That is the
treating them
time.
all equally.
Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a few comments with respect to the employment insurance program. During the first weeks and months of the crisis, my office received calls from people who wanted to apply for employment insurance, but there's one call that really struck me. It was from a single father who was performing essential work. He had to work, but he had trouble with childcare. So the whole aspect that everything was shut down, but there was a need for benefits and these needs were not necessarily tied to EI. And I remember we tried to juggle all of that. And as my colleague, Mr. Desjardins, said, we encouraged people who called us in panic state to please go ahead and make an application. And we know even when we started this whole CERB system, I believe there were 30,000 applications in the first 10 minutes, and a few days after, there were 3 million applications. So we can understand that the need was great at that time. I'd also like to refer to an article that came out in La Presse in November. The article talked about recovering. I was afraid that I would get all kinds of calls in my office from panicked people, but I can say that didn't happen. And I find it most encouraging, this quote here, that the amounts to be recovered are not being considered as fraudulently obtained benefits, but people who were deemed to be ineligible later on in the process. So I think there was some confusion. People applied either sometimes in error, or they didn't understand, or others didn't understand. What I'd like to ask you is that I believe there were 1.2 million letters. You talked about the number of letters that were sent out. The commissioner referred to this as well. How does this recovery process, how is it going? Are people complying with their obligations? With respect to I believe there was $3.2 million involved for the initial letters. We sent letters to 1.8 million individuals, and we recovered half of the amounts involved. So 1.2 million people responded. And I would say that we're making good progress. Do you have various ways of recovering the money?
Here, with other cases, I would be frank with you. C'est assez difficile de comparer parce que c'est très.
It's difficult to compare this because the situation is different, but it is positive. That's clear. We'll continue to make progress. As the commissioner stated, it's early days with this process. We're now getting responses. People are making arrangements now. It takes time to set this all up. but we are being reimbursed. Perhaps I would say it's, generally speaking, it's positive. And the Commissioner, do you think? Do you think that the recovery process is going well? If I may, yes, things are going well. We've set up teams who can take calls when people receive their letters saying that they have a debt, and we try to support them and come up with a payment process based on their financial situation. So for every Canadian, we have a repayment plan that's going to be affordable. And I know about one case. It's a young person, and this is an identity theft case. And the scammers got the money, were able to get the money from this young person's bank account, and this person was told he had to repay the amount. Has that happened very often, where there's been a case of identity fraud? And we did have quite a few cases of identity fraud. So we take the time to look at each specific case. We had a lot of measures put in place to reassure people that this would not have an impact on them if they were the victim, and we will ensure that people don't suffer from such a situation. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, we're nearing the end of the official time, but we started late, and I'm informed by the clerk that we actually continue to have a translation in the room, so I'm going to allow for one last full round. I will be judicious with the time. So turning to Mr. McCauley. Mr. McCauley, you're welcome to take up that last question you had from Mr. Hamilton. It is your time for 5 minutes, please, but you are on the clock, and it's my clock.
Thank you. I will, Mr. Hamilton, before I was so rudely interrupted before. The question was, the 960,000 that you're following up on with thousands more. How many thousands more, please?
Go ahead, Mark.
Ballparkish is good.
At this time, we've completed 300.
No, but the question was, in the opening statement, was thousands more. Like, no, how many thousands more on top of the 960 redeterminations?
We are working on doing about 875,000 reviews.
Okay. But the opening statement was 960,000 with thousands more, but you're saying it'll actually be less now.
I'm saying that we've issued, these ones that we've issued are for the people that received 2 payments in one period, mostly. We've completed a lot of work in reviewing if people were eligible because of the income threshold.
Mr. Lemieux, I'll just ask a question again, maybe a bit more clearly. In the opening statement, Mr. Hamilton said the letters were sent out, I think, for 960,000 redeterminations with thousands more coming. When we say thousands more, how many more is when you say thousands more on top of the 960?
I can't tell you exactly how more.
Would you be able to get back to us, to the committee with that?
But I would like to say that.
I just had one question. That was what the thousands more. Maybe we can get back to the committee on that. A.G. Hogan, thanks again for everything you're doing with us today. In your opening statement, you talked about post-payment verification if it's not done within the legislated timelines. What happens if it's not done within the legislated timelines? And how much money is at risk for taxpayers?
So the legislation indicates that there's about 36 months to communicate with an individual if to notify them that they owe money back. That unless there is a fraud or intentional misrepresentation, then that period of time extends. So when you think about some of the first payments under CERB going out in March of 2020, that time frame is quickly approaching. And as I mentioned earlier, there are likely some very honest mistakes that people just were confused. And so those need to be identified in that time frame, or then the government can't notify them and then proceed with the next step of deciding if collection is the avenue to take.
Okay. Mr. Hamilton, I just want to go back to you. We talked about the change in the process in summer of 2020 that you stated blocked 700,000 unwarranted applicants. When in the summer of 2020, you mentioned you couldn't do it earlier because you didn't have the previous year's tax information. Just walk me through very simply, because I'm not a tax person, thankfully. April 1 is tax time. Like, when do you have that information that you could have changed it? And it sounded like you changed it based on what you said, intelligence that you're receiving of some fraud happening. But wouldn't you not automatically just make the change based when you had the tax information from the previous year?
If I understand your question correctly, Mr. Chair,
Summer 2020 was the
one of
first
my colleagues may have. Think of the tax season that comes up, which will be starting shortly, and as you say, at the end of April is the end of it. So we wouldn't have a lot of people's tax information for 2019, even in the normal year, until after April 30, because people tend to back in.
When in summer 2020, was it June 23rd when summer starts, or was it at the end of summer? Like, when exactly did you make that change?
Oh, I don't know the precise date.
Would you get back to us? Because the question I'm going to ask is, okay, April 30th, the huge majority of Canadians are filing electronically now. So it's not like the old days where as long as you got to post, get it stamped by midnight on April 30th, you're fine. So you have May 1, the huge majority of taxes have been filed electronically. Would we not then be able to put better fencing around than simple self-attestation? And if not, like, why do we wait till summer? And as you mentioned in your statement,
you've got 30 seconds, Mr. McCauley.
Intelligence came up that there was fraud happening. Like, why the wait?
I think it's important, and I did reference this earlier, to remember as well that year the filing season was extended till June because of the pandemic. So it came in later than it normally would. So I think that's a key point as well. So
we're out of time. Let me just ask you to provide to the committee then, how many were actually sent on regular time and how many were sent on the delayed time for tax filing for us?
You're looking for a document to be tabled?
No, just the general information. Like, I don't need the documents, but just, what percentage was May 1 on time and regular time, and how many took advantage of the delay?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if one of my colleagues has an answer to that, but if we don't, then we can get back to us.
Let's do that. Mr. Dong, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to confess to my colleague, Mr. McCauley, I did file my tax late that year. I did. I couldn't find the proper. I couldn't find my accountant who was, who was working at the time. Anyways, so yeah, I was going to point out that was the change of the year. But I'm sure there are a lot of people that are watching this, and this is a very important topic, and that includes the individuals that they may not be too sure whether or not they should pay back the CERB, or if they're responsible for the CEWS, and so for the benefit of the public who are watching this, can Commissioner Hamilton tell us first of all, where can they find information if people do have these kind of questions? And then would they have to pay penalty for the overpayment? And if there's any interest on the overpayment for individuals and also for business who find out through their accountants, because we're walking into the tax filing season, that they were not 100% eligible.
Thank you for the question. And I think if people think they need to repay, I think they should contact us and find the information, and we'll make arrangements to get repaid. I think that for the individuals, certainly the government indicated early on that if you received it in error, there would be no interest and penalties, but you would have to repay. So that's an important consideration. You asked about interest and penalties. But we have information on our website. We have contact centers where people can call and talk to an agent to get more information. If I'm in this situation where I think I received something that I'm not eligible for, how do I go about repaying? And we've actually received a lot of repayments already from those kind of people. But they should look to our sources of information.
Can you quantify that? Is there maybe later on to the committee, like how much you've
Yeah, we have
recovered?
those numbers. I don't have them at my fingertips.
Not right now, but
yeah.
after. Okay.
Yes, definitely. We have had a lot of people that have come to us voluntarily and repaid. They understood now that they weren't eligible for it. So I think I almost think I have the number, but I don't want to give you the wrong one.
Okay,
So
sounds good. I have a couple other, two other questions. One is, I noticed in the report on page 15, the Auditor General says missing data for assessment of Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy effectiveness. And I remember you said when it comes to CERB, individuals do have to submit their SIN numbers and these personal information that helps CRA to check, later on. But why is it for Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, it was not required that the employer submit the employee who ultimately benefit from this program to submit their personal information?
Yes, thanks for the question. And that goes back to the issue that we've talked about several times here today of the speed of getting these programs in place and delivered. And it was felt at the time that if we did force employers to give us the SIN numbers, that was going to really slow down the process and we weren't going to be able to get the benefits out in time. I may ask Jillian to elaborate on that, but that's essentially it. So in a world, it might have been nicer to have the SIN numbers, but we just didn't feel like we had the time to do that. And again, we knew we would be able to come back and verify after the fact.
So my follow-up question to that is, would that diminish our ability to recover funds that was paid out to individual who wasn't qualified? The fact that we did not get these employees' SIN numbers.
No, I don't. Go ahead, Mark, sir.
If I may, Mr. President, we now have that information because we have the T4 for all of the employees in Canada for that period of time, and we know for which businesses they were working. So it's now possible for us to look at that information.
That's good to know. And on page 23, the Auditor General talked about no real-time business revenue data. And the report go on to say, more broadly, real-time GST, HST reporting could also reduce the reporting burden on businesses, reduce errors, and improve compliance on tax assessment to help be informing, design, and assess public policy. And I see the response of the...
if you can pose your question very quickly, please.
Sure.
We have time for a quick answer.
Can you tell us what's in the works when it comes to real-time reporting?
Yes, I'll be very quick on this, but there are two aspects to real-time reporting. One is e-payroll, which we have talked about earlier, where we get electronic real-time payroll information from businesses. The one that you're referring to there is what we call e-invoicing, where we get electronic invoices at the time of the transaction rather than waiting for the monthly or quarterly filing. And what we're doing right now is we're looking at what other countries have done, because there are a few countries that have implemented this system. It's a fairly big change. So we're taking our time to make sure that we think about it and get it done right, and we're doing the e-payroll at the same time. So we're really in the, I guess, advanced investigative stage of how we might implement such.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, vous avez la parole pour 2 minutes.
Madame Sinclair Desgagnés, 2.5 minutes. My question is once again to the Minister of ESDC, pardon me. Are you aware that that the systems in France and the U.S. were flexible enough to allow them to deal with the crisis? Mr. Tremblay. Thank you for your question. I'm not aware of the EI situation in France, but I am very familiar with the American system and the solution that the United States put in place to deal with pandemic benefits showed that Canada took the right decision. I've received a lot of reports in March, April, and May of 2020, and I've realized that it took months for people to get benefits. That's the situation we wanted to avoid. That's why we settled on CERB. That's interesting. However, the U.S. is more advanced in terms of fund recovery. How much money was sent by mistake or claimed improperly? So if I understand correctly, both systems had their advantages and disadvantages. Yes, thank you for your question. Yes, that's obvious. And as the AG's report pointed out, there were shortcomings in the delivery and in the design, but we were dealing with an urgent situation. But that wasn't exactly my question. I only have 30 seconds. We have a recession that's on the horizon. Do you feel that the department is prepared to deal with an increased volume of applications during the next crisis, which we hope is going to be far away, but we know it will, in fact, be happening soon? There may be an increase in volume of VI applications. And as we did with other situations, we will set up necessary measures to ensure that we can deliver EI benefits in a timely fashion. Thank you very much.
For your last 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I do want to thank all the witnesses for being present today on this important discussion. I know how important this is to many regular Canadians who will unfortunately be forced with, in some cases, having to claw back some of the dollars that in many instances, I believe, they were encouraged to. You heard it from Ms. Shanahan. You heard it from other MPs during that time. And I believe that's a critical fact that is only speaking to a matter of fairness on behalf of Canadians. Now, we understand the circumstances to which they were incentivized to actually apply for the program in what was one of our country's most dire situations. And I do have a greater amount of respect for the families who'd had to make that decision, but understand the need, of course, to ensure that we do the work of making sure that we regulate and take the appropriate measures to ensure that some of that money is recouped, particularly those in fraudulent situations. But of course, that work wasn't done by a wave of a magic wand. It was done by regular, everyday folks, regular Canadians working for the CRA. So I have a really tough time, especially when the commissioner mentions that there's unlimited resources at the CRA and everything is great. And you can do all the things, even though taxpayers, Canadians know tax avoidance is high in Canada. It's become an issue. And then the fact that the CRA had to administer an unprecedented program like this, given the certain capacity, I have capacity concerns. So my question is, given the unprecedented strain of administering and delivering the pandemic relief programs, did it have a negative effect on the CRA's efforts to address the long-standing corporate tax gaps? To the Commissioner.
Thank you for the question, and maybe just to correct the record, I don't think I would have ever said everything is fabulous at CRA. We've got infinite resources. I mean, we all deal with having resources to do a job. What I do think is that we have adequate resources to do both of the things that you're describing. We haven't seen a material reduction in our efforts on tax evasion more broadly. There was certainly a pause as the pandemic arrived, and we had to send people home and take people, off their duties so that they could help us on other fronts.
Well,
but that was a temporary.
CRA's estimates for the annual gaps in uncollected corporate tax then between 2018 and today?
Pardon me, I'm sorry.
Grown?
Could you just repeat the last part?
Since the numbers I cited before were from 2014 to 2018 at $5 billion to $7 billion in tax avoidance, you're saying that you have enough resources to tackle that problem. I'm saying, show me the results. Between 2018 and 2022, have you been able to actually monitor?
Thank you, Mr. Deja. Let's hear from Mr. Hamilton for a brief answer.
I would say yes. I don't have the results right at my fingertips, but every time that we get additional money to battle tax evasion, it comes from the Department of Finance with a measure of how much money are we going to bring in by our audits, by our additional efforts, and we've always been able to meet those. As I say, there was a particular point in time as the pandemic arrived.
Thank you. That was a superb answer, so I'll stop there because I don't want to keep you here all night. Mr. Cram, you have the floor for 5 minutes. After that, we'll have one more from the government side, and then that will be it. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I would like to come back to the Auditor General and pages 32 and 33 of the report. I'd like to read a couple of quick quotes. As of June 2022, the department identified approximately 13,000 cases of identity theft in employment insurance emergency response benefit payments worth $7.9 million. And then the next point is, as of July 2022, the agency identified more than 23,000 cases of identity theft in COVID-19 benefit payments for individuals worth $131 million. And those 2 points are regrettably under the heading unrecoverable amounts. So is it safe to say that that $138.9 million is gone forever?
I'm not sure I can conclude on that because some of those cases were referred to law enforcement, and those activities have to continue to determine whether or not the parties in question can be found and whether amounts can be recovered. So it's impossible for me to tell you that it's hopeless. It's really probably maybe the department can give you an update, or we'd have to wait for time to pass on law enforcement to conclude on the cases.
Okay, well, then maybe I will ask the witnesses from the CRA and the ESDC. Could you describe some of your activities with law enforcement as we go after these 36,000 cases of identity theft and the $138.9 million?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. And I would say that in anticipation of the emergency benefits being launched, we understood that fraudulent activities would be increasing. And so we strengthened our anti-fraud controls and our measurements in regards to algorithms and other fraud detection capabilities. We prevented and put stop pays for more than 30,000 cases, demonstrating about $42 million savings. Some of the stop pays did not happen in a timely basis to be able to have prevented money from leaving the door, but we prevented further money from leaving the door. And we have, because of seeing that some of these fraudulent activities appear to be potential fraud schemes, this is where you have the 13,000 cases that were referred to the RCMP for follow-up. That represent, in our estimation, about $7.9 million. We stay in constant contact with our colleagues in their official duties. We will be told when they're ready to tell us where they're at in their investigation process.
Okay, and just for thoroughness, the fourth bullet point on that is related to $60 million worth of, we're under criminal investigation for the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Is the fraud related to the wage subsidy following all the same processes as all the other cases of fraud?
Thank you for the question. Yes, it would be essentially the same process where we identified fraud, stopped some, but where we weren't able to do it, we refer it to the authorities if we can't handle it ourselves. And that, I think it is miscast under the title of unrecoverable amounts, because I think that chapter hasn't been written yet, so we are hopeful that we will be able to get recoveries on some, if not all of that.
Okay, I would like to change gears now to page 18 of the report. I'll read another quick quote from the Auditor General. In our opinion, the ability for low-income individuals to earn more on the Canada Recovery Benefit represented a disincentive to work, which impacted some labor markets at a crucial time when the need for employees was trending upwards. I was wondering if ESDC has ever done a study or come up with an estimate as to the loss to the Canadian economy due to this disincentive to work and just collect pandemic benefits.
We don't have a study at this time that would say that. There's always a seen this possibility. We always have been actually kind of aware, and actually that's why we put the 1,000, you remember, and in the EI herb to allow people to continue to work because we wanted to stay attached to the labor market. And later, of course, we even With CRB, we created a situation where they could actually do even more. So that's what we've done. What is very encouraging from an economic perspective is as soon as the measures from a public health perspective, as soon as the measures were off, people were going back working. That's what we have seen, including when we had measures on EI to facilitate access to EI, but we end up with less than 5% in terms of unemployment, so which gave the impression that actually people were happy to go back to work. You have to remember, for a lot of workers...
Thank you. I'm going to stop you there. That was a fine answer. And I'm going to turn now to... No, it was very good. No, c'était très bien. Ms. Yip, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. I'll be sharing my time with Mr. Fragis-Gaddis. My question is to Mr. Hamilton. And it's in regards to the Auditor General's recommendation 10.114 to increase the recovery of COVID-19 amounts owed and reduce the administrative burden. The CRA should put in a system of functionalities in place to apply refunds against COVID-19 amounts owed. Can you explain what system functionalities will be in place and update the status of this recommendation? Thank you.
Certainly, thank you for the question. And that's a feature that we have in our systems to be able to offset amounts that are owed to the government against refunds or other payments that would go out. So that's a way of collecting. We have that functionality in place now for almost all aspects. And there's one other piece that is coming up in the I guess next week. We're hoping to have the update to the system to allow that. But maybe I would just ask Jillian to elaborate a little bit on that point, because it is quite an important part of our recovery efforts.
Super. So, Mr. Chair, in CRA's, if I could say, normal systems, it's standard practice that there's an opportunity to apply refunds against amounts outstanding in the same revenue line. So, with the COVID benefits, as the Commissioner stated, in October 2022, we had the ability to apply T1 refunds, individual refunds, to COVID outstanding debts. And in February, we will have the ability in our benefit system to apply any benefit credits to outstanding COVID debts as well. So as the Commissioner mentioned, this coming weekend, the treatment of debts or refunds towards COVID debts will look like any other program delivered by the Canada Revenue Agency, and that we'll be able to apply those amounts to COVID debts outstanding.
Thank you very much. Time is limited, and I did want to go back to Mr. Tremblay. Sir, you have a lot of experience in the public service. This question was asked of Mr. Hamilton, but I did want to get your thoughts on it. Suppose that a system of prepayment verification was put in place along the lines of some of the ideas that have been raised here by friends across the table, so to speak. What would have been the result in terms of getting payment out to Canadian individuals, families, businesses? Obviously, there would have been a delay, but can you talk about the delay, what it would have looked like, what we might have seen, and the effect on the society at large?
If we would have received 3 million of demands in the EI process as the EI system works with pre-measures, it would have been months and months of backlog, let's be honest. The system would not have been able to respond quickly to such a demand. And I can ask Cliff to go on this because he's got the longest experience on EI here. So.
No, please.
Yes, and that was a critical factor in the design of the emergency response benefit. In the middle of March, overnight, we saw an increase of hundreds of thousands of applications coming into the EI system, and we were at a situation where the EI system was about to crumble if there was not a different decision that was made because of the rules related to the EI program. And if we hadn't implemented the emergency response benefit partnership between ESDC and CRA, millions of Canadians, it ended up being 8 million Canadians received the service, millions of Canadians would have been waiting well through 2020 and into 2021 before they would have been able to receive any type of payment.
A lot of constituents and a lot of businesses waiting across the country. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Not clarifying, but adding a bit more color to what CRA had put forward. Mr. Hamilton, just very quickly as a final question, and I think you put this last week, you did mention it again, but I think it's an important point. It speaks to this whole issue of the legislative timeline. Is CRA confident that it will meet its verification obligations under the legislated timeline?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. Yes, we are very confident that we can. I think, as the Auditor General pointed out, if there is case of misrepresentation, that 3-year time frame does not come into play, and we're confident that we will be able to get the compliance work done that we need to do and not be impacted by those deadlines.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate everyone coming in today, and for your indulgence. We went a little bit late, but it was a good, very good committee meeting, and meeting adjourned.